So today with us is PadmaSandhya, who has an experience in regulatory reporting profile. Even I am hearing this profile first time. Although I might have the knowledge of the job description, which she might tell you in this video, but the names differ as per the organization. So PadmaSandhya, welcome to the show.
Hi, well, hello, thank you.
Yeah, so can you brief us about your role where you have worked in the past without naming the organization, but we want a detailed explanation from your side, like what kind of work you did and how your day looks like.
Right, okay. So, yeah, you're right. I was in regulatory reporting for 2.5 years in a multinational bank that looks at IB, corporate bank, retail, etc., cards, etc. Um, so my role primarily involved around banking regulations. So, as you might be aware, there are Basel norms which a bank has to follow, which means it has to maintain a certain amount of capital. Should there be another 2008 crisis, we don't want something called globally significant banks to fail. And if these banks fail, it's going to have a butterfly effect and it's going to lead to another global collapse. So essentially, what my team used to do was to monitor these limits to ensure that we satisfy the Basel norms and ensure that if at all there is a breach, then we are taking immediate action to address it. So a typical day in my case, so I was primarily in a division called risk-weighted assets, and then I moved to something called projects. In risk-weighted assets, what we used to do was we used to calculate on a daily basis and on a monthly basis 4 different risk types: credit risk, counterparty risk, market risk, and operational risk. And the way we used to do it is we used to get data from different sources and used to have certain matrices like exposure at default, probability of default, loss given default. And there would be certain models that we would use to compute the risk weight and hence to judge how much of capital is required to maintain as a buffer in case something happens to this particular counterparty. Moving
So
on from this, we used to do this on a monthly basis as well. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, so capital basically capital comes into the picture in the capital adequacy ratio, which a bank has to
Right,
maintain. So see,
right.
our audience will not be aware of the profile which you're talking about. So it's
Okay,
particularly related to the banking sector only, where the banks have
right,
to follow Basel III norms. So I would like you to
right.
explain
Yes.
in brief at least what are those
Okay.
norms.
Right. Okay. So when it came to the bank that I worked at, we were transitioning from Basel III to Basel IV. So the Basel Accords are nothing but they started in the late 1980s, where a few banks came together, or rather a few countries came together and said, look, we need to have certain norms to specify how much we should be holding as capital for all the lending that we do. Because when you look at a bank as such, it lends money, it lends a lot of money. It puts itself in a position of risk because when the bank's lenders come to it and ask for money, it should be able to give. It cannot go insolvent because, as you might be aware, banking is what holds any economy together.
Correct.
So, to ensure that these banks do not fail, they have certain stipulations. Primarily, from the team that I worked in, we looked at three main stipulations. One was risk weighted assets. So, what we essentially do is we look at an asset, say, for example, a loan or say a market or a trading position that we have, and we compute the risk that it carries of it not being met. For example, if I've given a loan to say some ABCD, and then I just judge going by his past records or going by similar people or going by certain other advanced models. I just look at what is the chance that this person will not pay me back. And like this, there'll be so many loans that the bank would have given in
Mm.
different divisions. You accumulate all of that and you see if you're in a very risky position. Basically, that's what capital adequacy seeks to do. You ensure that you don't cross a certain limit, you don't overlend, and hence make it hard for the bank to sustain itself. Otherwise, we would have a collapse like the Lehman Brothers collapsed. So the
Mhm.
first one is risk-weighted assets. The other one that we have is large exposures. So the large exposures, ideally, what happens is you ensure that you don't cross a certain threshold, like for example, 25% of your lending
Mm.
does not focus on only one counterparty group. If it crosses that, then that means your bank is entirely dependent on receiving or on making good the payments that or on make or receiving the payments from that particular counterparty.
Mm.
If you become over dependent on receiving payments from that particular counterparty, then you are not a very stable bank. In case that person flouts, your bank is gone. So that is large exposures. Leverage exposure again is it. So you have you take it, you build it from the finance balance sheet It's all the on-balance sheet items where you have loans that you've given, or the derivatives that you're trading in, or the stockbroking transactions that you have on behalf of companies, etc. Apart from that, you also add off-balance sheet items where you say, for example, if you're given a loan of say $1 million to a person, and so far they've taken $60,000 from it, or say $600,000 from it, you still have $400,000 left. So you look at what is the chance that this person will take this $400,000 as well. So you add certain off-balance sheet items like this. You also add foreign currency exposure to it, etc. Make adjustments for all of these, and then you finally arrive at what is the risk that your bank is looking at. And there is a certain limit, like for example, 8% or 9% or 10%. It depends on the country that you're operating in. Where if you cross this 8%, 9% of your capital, of your exposure, and your capital is less than that, then you will have to either bring in additional capital, or you will have to ensure that your risk is hedged perfectly.
And then how you take into account those non-fund based facilities that are off balance sheet item?
So for each of them, there are different matrices. So for example, you will have undrawn commitments as well. You will have drawn commitments as well. You will have bank guarantees that are being given, etc. So for each of them, there will be a specific risk weight that you will assign, which will again depend on a lot of models like history of the counterparty, or similar industries, or your relationship with the counterparty, and even the parent of the counterparty, etc. A lot of things. It's not just one specific thing that you can assign. However, I think now that a lot of countries are moving to something called Basel IV norms, some of these things are getting standardized now, so that the discrepancy between banks is reduced.
All right. So you were talking about your how your day looks like. So can you brief us about that?
Right. Okay. So I had a very nice work culture, actually speaking, and because mine was a UK-based bank, my login time was a little late, which very much suited my personality. So I would
11:30 to
log in
12.
by, yeah, 11:30 was when I used to generally log in. In fact, my manager used to joke that we can't have meeting in the morning because Padma doesn't log in. So that was a thing. But yeah, I used to log in by around 11:30, depending on the day. So I initially started off in the RWA team, then I moved to something called projects. In projects, what we did were, so just to give an example of one of the things that I did, you have a lot of foreign currency exposures, right? So for example, an exposure in US dollar is very different from an exposure in, say, some exotic currency. An exotic currency would be a currency that is not that easily available, or not that easily traded. So for that, you will have to assign a specific risk, etc. So one of the projects that I was involved in was to streamline that process and identify how best to report these exotic risk weights. Not just exotic, basically any currency risk weight. So one of the things that I do in projects team was that. So anyways, coming back to this thing, so 11:30 I would log in and check my mails, etc., what had happened, see people have responded to my mails. And then around 12:30, we would have an India team meeting. So my team used to work partly in the UK and partly in India. We'd have an India team briefing, and we'll see what has to be done for the day. And especially if it's the start of the week, we'll probably have an outline of who's doing what for the rest of the week. And in case you're in a BAU team, which is business as usual team, you probably start off the day by looking at all your inputs and seeing how you should begin your daily calculations. Because we do send out daily reports, because our stakeholders, which include markets team, trading desk, treasury, etc., all of them need our risk-weighted reports to be able to make their decisions. So yeah, if you're in the BAU team, which is business as usual team, you start with looking at the daily facts and figures and trying to make sense of it, trying to calculate it and publish it. In my other role, I would just start off with a meeting with my teammates, and then uh, lunchtime, of course. And then we would come back, and I would have a series of meeting with my UK colleagues, where one of some parts of me, we had to deal with a lot of stakeholders. So some of the stakeholders, like I said, were markets team, some stakeholders are treasury team. So multiple stakeholders we'll have meetings with, because you cannot just bring in any initiative just like that. So in my case, when I was talking about foreign exchange risk weights that we were talking about, there are 2, 3 methods that you can use, but each team wants a different method because it is more beneficial to them. So you will have to have multiple stakeholder engagements, which would be probably a lot of internal departments mostly. And then you will also have stakeholder. You'll also have meetings with your technology team, and then you'll also have a overall meeting around 6 p.m. India time, which would be approximately around 1:30 over there, with the London team as well, and decide again how things are progressing, who's doing what in the London team, who's doing what in the India team. And then once all the meetings are done by around 7:30, you might still have some meetings after that because you're working on UK time. You sit down to do your own work. In this, what I used to do is I used to get all my data and I used to analyze it. So we have certain software that helps us do it. For example, we had a lot of in-house software that we used to analyze, and we also had we had data visualization software like ClickView, etc. And I also used to do a bit of reading about how best we can adapt these items and make the best judgment as to what and how to calculate the risk. So I would take some about 1.5, 2 hours to do the reading, and by that would be around 8:30. And then there might be some meetings after that. For example, if they need urgent information about a particular report, or they need urgent information about a particular data that is not easily available, or they need particular information about how to specifically report a particular item. So these kind of meetings do happen because again, UK time. And then generally by 9:30, I tend to log off. But if you're in the BAU teams, you would finish submitting the daily reports, you'd finish circulating the daily reports, and then you will go on to more analytical activities like analyzing month-on-month movement and identifying why the movement was there. For example, if there's a steep increase in counterparty credit risk, you would want to analyze whether it is because you've issued more loans or whether it is because the riskiness of the counterparties you're issuing to has increased, or whether you are issuing to high risk counterparties. So these are analysis that we do, and we make a pitch, and then we have a monthly meeting with higher stakeholders where we give our findings as well. So this is how a typical day looks like.
So basically, your entire job profile rotates around the Basel III norms, Basel IV norms,
Right,
applying with that.
right,
Because in
right,
the regulatory
right.
reporting
Yes.
framework, Basel III and Basel IV are only the one category. There can be multiple other things as well.
Right,
But you were not into
right.
that role, right?
Right. Yes. Ours was more of a niche segment where we used to look at primarily ensuring
Hmm.
that we complied with the Basel III norms, because by themselves they are a huge department.
All right.
Each metric requires a lot of complexities and yeah, all of that. And we
Even
had a lot of entities as well, which had different. So, for example, if we had a US subsidiary, it was slightly different. If we had an Irish subsidiary, it was slightly different. So, yeah.
my question is like there has to be some central back in UK and there has to be some reporting to them as well. So whether it
Right,
comes
right.
under to the regulatory
Yes,
reporting?
yes, yes. Yes, it does. So whatever we do is under the aegis of this Basel III norm. So
Hmm.
the central bank, there are two central authorities for banking in the UK. One is the Prudential Regulatory Authority, which is PRA, and the other one is the FCA, which is Financial Conduct Authority. So PRA looks more at matrices, as far as I understand, and FCA looks more at moral conduct, etc. Like, for example, frauds or any kind of criminal activities in general is what is looked at by FCA. PRA looks at your whether you are sufficient, whether you can sustain yourself. So yeah, whatever Basel III. So the way Basel works is it just makes accords, it just makes the rules. It is up to the member countries, I think about 45 to 50, to adopt what they feel is best. For example, in India, if I'm not wrong, we have a 9% capital adequacy ratio based on
Correct.
risk-weighted assets. Whereas in the UK, it is 8 plus a few other. You have some buffers, countercyclical buffer, and some other buffers that you apply, and it becomes around 12%. So it is very different uh, among countries itself, because Basel is just a guide for you. It is up to the countries to adopt what they want, and how the countries adopt is based on their central banks. So yes, you're right. PRA and FCA come under that. When we say Basel reporting, it is to the PRA and FCA.
All right. So are you following the World Cup T20 as well?
No, not much. Actually, not much into
Uh,
cricket, to be honest. But I do know that we lost in semifinals, which was kind of sad.
yeah. So since you were talking about UK, so I just checked the score. England needs 6 more runs in the 10 balls.
Wow.
So that's
I
that's
think
quite
yeah, they'll win
interesting.
it then.
That's
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
interesting. So do you had some, previous experience in the banking sector before joining the company after CA?
Right. So after CA, I wanted to explore something very different, and I didn't want the traditional domains of audit or taxation, which is why I decided to explore banking. earlier banks used to be very honest, terrify me because there is something about them. They're so formal, then they're so cold, etc. But my view has changed a lot after working at my bank. Yeah, so the main reason for me to join was because I just wanted to explore something completely different from audit and taxation.
Do you had a
That's the thing.
previous experience as well? Because in the banking, they require certain knowledge, like you're talking about
Right.
Basel III.
No, no, I
It-
joined as a fresher. I joined as fresher.
Okay,
Yeah,
without
yeah.
without any prior knowledge, you must be having some bank audit knowledge or something like that, or nothing.
Nothing. So in my interview, what they asked me was basically IFRS 9. And they asked me about financial instruments, they asked me about derivatives, impairments, etc. All these kind of things. So they require you to have basic financial knowledge. So basically, SFM kind of subjects
Hmm.
is what they look at in general,
All
but
right.
not necessarily a prior experience, especially if you're joining at an entry level grade.
So I think England wins. England need 1 run to win in 8 balls, so they
Oh,
win.
that's great.
They win the World Cup.
Yay.
So the question is like what kind of qualification is required to enter into this regulator reporting role? CA is one of the qualification, but there could be
Hmm.
other qualification as well,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yeah, yeah. So in general, CA is one thing. They also look for CA page you cleared level one or level two could
Hmm.
probably join this role because you would have a better understanding of how one what each product is that you're looking at and analyzing and reporting. The other thing could be MBAs as well. If you don't
Hmm.
have prior financial degrees to support you, then an MBA is a good thing to go
Hmm.
for. And of course, other professional degrees like ACCA or CPA in India, I'm not sure, but ACCA, yes, they do accept. Yeah.
Hmm. What about CS, company secretary?
I haven't seen CS rules here. Generally seen CA
तो
rules.
वो
Yeah.
बुरा
CAs, MBAs, and ACCA. Yeah.
हाँ हाँ बोल दो, बुरा मान जाएंगे वो. They must be
Okay, fine.
they must be seeing this video,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, sure, sure. Yeah.
right. So now the question is like, let's forget about the qualification part.
Hmm.
Let's suppose a person is just a 12th standard pass and company do not have any
Hmm.
qualification check. What skill set that
Hmm.
person has to have in order to work into this role?
Right. Okay. So the first thing I feel is that being very open is very important
Mm,
and being able to adapt. Because one thing is, at least when it comes to this, when it comes to regulatory reporting, it is not something that you learn anywhere. It is something you learn on the job. So adaptive and quick learning skill is very important. That's the first thing. And
mm,
communication, because you will be interacting with multiple stakeholders. So you need to be able to communicate effectively and be able to put forth your point without coming off as aggressive. So communication skills is very important. And I would say even negotiating skills, because in this case, because you're holding multiple teams
mm,
together and you're satisfying a lot of stakeholder requirements, you need to know how to negotiate so that everybody's interest and your own interest is satisfied. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing is to be just naturally very, very curious because a lot of reading is required. And because we're talking about regulations, regulations keep getting amended. So all of us
mm,
CA students know every 6 months it's a torture just going through the amendments. So when we're talking about regulations and compliance, especially, you need to be very well aware of what is going on. So you need to develop and cultivate a reading habit and just understand how to interpret and apply them. So just basic reading, sustained reading habit is very
mm,
important as well. And apart from that, I would say deftness in Excel and generally
mm,
computing things because Excel, you would be looking at multiple spreadsheets in a day, closing. Like at a point in time, I would have about 8 to 10 spreadsheets open because you have to look at multiple sets of data to analyze and come to a conclusion because and they'll be in different formats as well,
mm.
and people will give in whatever format they feel like, and you it's up to you to interpret from 8 to 10 spreadsheets at any point in time and arrive at a conclusion and make sense of the data that is present in front
Mm.
of you.
So would your role involve talking to the business team as well, like relationship managers or portfolio managers in UK?
Yes, yes, it did. Yeah. So for example, just so what will happen is these portfolio managers, trading desks, or other people, they have a very limited view. So they look at only their portfolio and they look at only their trading desk.
Hmm.
But overall, a lot of other portfolio manager trading desks are doing a lot of deals in different parts of the globe or in the
Hmm.
same country with the
Hmm.
same counterparties. So, for example, if I have to take large exposures, person A might be thinking that, okay, my deal is within the limits. Person B might thinking my
Hmm.
deal is within the limits.
Hmm.
But when it becomes A, B, C, D, E, From the central team where we are located, we observe that we have crossed the threshold and this is not something that is correct. So we go back and tell. And then these people will say, I can't negotiate my deal. I can't do this. So you have to manage that conflict and you will have to ensure that you don't cross the threshold, you don't breach. Because if you breach the norms, PRA, that is a regulator, is going to fine you very heavily. And there might be some other restrictions as well. Like, for example, you won't be able to distribute dividends. So yeah, that is a very, very key point because so you have to interact with the portfolio managers, you have to interact with the trading desk because sometimes what they are doing may be fine at that level, but at an overall level, it may not
But
be in
but
the
they
best
they
interest.
they must they must at least check or take mail approval before sanctioning any loan or committing to the
True,
customers.
true. Yes, that is true. That is true. That is why we run it on a daily basis. So our reports work on a daily basis. So what happens is because we are a niche team that is calculating. So if T is the day, we are able to report only on a T+2 basis. So they will not have instant data available because we have to get data from around the globe. So that is a 24-hour round by itself. And then after that, we'll have to analyze and we'll have to tell them. So there is no instantaneous availability of information. Yeah, which is why sometimes, especially when it approaches month ends, we preemptively and proactively tell people that, hey, these are the limits. You are approaching this limit. Do whatever you're doing, take care that you don't cross the limit.
So was there any
That
sector-wise
especially in front of quarter.
was there any sector-wise exposure limit as well into this model? Like you talked about
No,
group party-wise and group-wise you talked about. But if a bank is taking exposure in a particular sector, was there any limit that up to this amount only we are going to take exposure in this particular sector?
So in the UK, as far as I am aware, there is no sectoral limits, but I might be wrong because we focus mainly on counterparty limits only. There might be a sectoral limit, but I am personally not aware of that.
It can be internal to the bank, may not be in the Basel norm.
Internal, no, we didn't have. Like with respect to risk weighting, we didn't have. Maybe with respect to overall sanctioning of loans,
Sanctioning,
etc., there might be a case.
exactly. Maybe the
Yeah,
credit department
that
might
would
be
be there.
aware.
Yeah, credit department would have it. But we are just looking at it from a bank's overall perspective. The bank doesn't fail. So from that perspective, we are more focused on the counterparty as such than the industry or the sector.
Okay, so let's talk about the hierarchy level. Like if a person joins as a fresher, from what position that a person starts and up to what position that person can
Right,
reach, what hierarchy looks
right.
like.
Yeah. So you'll join as an analyst if you're a CA or you have an MBA or something like that, but you're a fresher. So you join as you join as an analyst, and after about 2.5, 3 years, you would become an AVP, assistant vice president. In this, so as an analyst, your role is very restricted, as in you'd be doing the grunt work, doing things like making spreadsheets, setting up meetings, and talking to people. Just trying to get things done. As an AVP, your power improves a bit more, but your accountability also increases, where you're actually overseeing things and coming up with new ideas and coming up with ways to look at things differently. And you also have the power to, for example, as an AVP, I had the I had the power to enter meetings and convince people to do things the way I wanted and my team wanted it to do. That you won't have as an analyst. And so, yeah, so those are the things, but you also have to be accountable if something fails horribly, then you have to be accountable for that, which as an analyst, you don't have. From an AVP, you move on to a VP, vice president.
Right.
And as a vice president, you will be having a lot of AVPs under you, will be doing different reporting, would be dealing with different kinds of stakeholders or doing different projects. For example, in the projects team, I was looking at the foreign exchange part. There were people looking at Basel for implementation and leverage reporting, etc. So as a VP, you overlook all of that. And finally, you have a director who looks after all the VPs who are managing different sub teams and who basically brings together all the teams. So in our thing, we had RWA team separately, large exposures, leverage, etc. separately. He's the director who ensures that everybody remembers that we are working for this bank and not for the team alone. So that is the director's responsibility, just to ensure everything keeps going forward. And after the director, you have the MD of the country for finance.
Right. So now coming on to
MD's role, I
the
don't have to explain. Yeah.
one of the toughest and interesting question, which majority of our audience would be looking at, that is regarding the remuneration part. Like from where a
Right.
person can start, and I'm not talking about at each level how the salary grows, but at what level a person can start and up to what level that person can go, minimum and highest amount into this role?
Right. Okay. So approximately right now, I think you can start at around 15 per annum,
Mm-hmm.
15 lakhs per annum. And the best part about it is it's mostly take home. You have very little going to PF and very little being counted as perks. So most of it is take home. So out of 15, maybe as an analyst, about 13.5 would be take home.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you move, and then you'll have increments. Increments depend on your performance. You'll also have a bonus depending on the grade that you have. So the bonus can be, if you did like everybody else, it's around 1 lakh, 1,50,000. If you did a little better than the rest, it can be around 2,50,000 or 3 lakhs, a good sizable amount. And increments vary depending on the bank's performance. So it could be anywhere between 10 to 20%, depending on the bank's performance, and of course, depending on your performance and your grade as well. So yeah, that's the thing about an analyst. As an AVP, you would start around 20 to 25 lakhs, basically. And then again, similar things about bonus. Bonus, of course, is higher at this level. It's about, I think, 4 lakhs, 4 to 5 lakhs. And you again have increments of 20% or so. And at VP, so by the time you come to VP level, you're earning about 35 to 40
You're a team leader
lakhs
at that
per
point of time.
annum. And yeah, you're a team leader at that point of
Mm-hmm.
time. And VP means you would have about uh, 6 to 7 years of experience.
Correct.
So which means if you join at the age of 22, like I did, then by the time you're 30, you are a VP most likely. Like maybe around 28, 29 itself, you could be a VP. And that would be around 30 to 40 lakhs, depending on where you started and how your increments were all along the way, because it's just a geometric progression. Depending on that, you would be around somewhere 30 to 40 lakhs in cash. Beyond that, I am not really aware, but I guess directors and MD definitely earn a lot more. Around 60 to 70 is my guess.
Even it ranges to one CR plus
Yeah,
at the
easily,
director
very
level.
easily. Yeah.
No, not
Including
easily.
bonus, if you put
They,
bonus or not.
they
Yeah.
they must have 20 years of experience into that. So by the age of
Yeah,
40
yeah.
only, they will be getting this much amount of
Yeah,
package. So that's
correct.
the harsh
Yeah.
reality. Any final advice you want to give to our audience who are budding CAs or MBAs? Like I have not seen much of the MBAs into this role. What's your perspective on this?
Hmm. I think, yeah, it's a good role to explore. It's a good role to start off with, especially if you want to understand the risk side of a lot of products that we give. Because I think oftentimes we just focus on the returns and we sometimes forget how risky things can get. And I think one perspective for me that I personally developed was being able to understand that, okay, great, anything gives you a great return, that's fine. But you also need to understand what is a safer bet and
Mhm.
what will, like, how are you supposed to judge something as to whether it's safe or not. So this is a great way to get into the banking industry. One, it's a great way to also understand a lot of instruments, like different types of derivatives, different types of stockbroking transactions, repo trades, or bonds, etc., or pension funds, anything. You come across a lot of different financial products and you can learn so much about them. So after this, in case you want to decide, in case you want to do something in the finance field, like say for example you want to get into asset management, you want to get into investment bank or anything, this knowledge will help you because you're already very aware of the different kinds of products that are available in the market. So yeah, this could be a good place to learn things and then move on and do understand that this is what you want to do. See, I think one thing that I personally faced was trying to understand what I want and what I don't want. So I was not sure exactly how these financial products work, etc. Going here, it helped me understand what these financial products are, how they work, and whether I want to continue working in such an industry. So I think it's a great way to learn without fully dipping your toes in the industry, to get first to get a hold of how things work and then decide if you want to go into this kind of industry, like asset management or
Right.
financial industries in general. Yeah.
Right. So you are into such a good role, good pay package, and in the company is definitely an MNC. So what was the reason of leaving that and moving into the MBA?
So I took CAT because personally I've always wanted to have a more wholesome perspective. So one thing I found myself wanting was that my perspective is very limited to finance and risk, and I was not thinking of other aspects like strategy, or I was not thinking of other aspects like marketing. So many other aspects are there to a decision. I was very focused on, just the financial part of it. So I wanted to develop into a more wholesome personality, and just so that I become a better person myself, and in the future, if I want, maybe I can start my own business, etc. I also wanted to explore other roles, like for example, right now I'm in finance. I also want to see what's in consulting, what is in marketing, etc.
Mhm.
So I took the CAT last year, and yeah, I got through the CAT. I took some interviews from some of the IIMs,
Mhm.
and yeah, and when IIM calls you, you don't say no. So I joined it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you joined a 2-year program recently. Director of the IIM just told us I mean,
Yes.
one of the
Yeah.
interview, they are discontinuing 2 year. They are planning to discontinue
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
2 year
They did.
program.
Yeah. They did. Yeah, to be honest, even we were shocked to hear that over here. But I think the idea behind it is that, people are very fast paced right now. They don't want to devote 2 years to a program and they can get the same thing in a year. And also, I think industry requires more seasoned professionals,
Right. But
more people who have work ex.
so just tell me, I mean, what is the fee structure there in IIM Ahmedabad right now? Because that is also a
So the
deciding
fees is
factor.
around, right, the fees is around 23 lakhs
And
for
for
both
the
the years.
for total 23 lakh plus you also pay for the stay.
No, no, everything put together is 23.
Okay, it has not increased much in that case.
No, IMA has not increased much. I think IM, B, and C have increased the fees a
Mhm.
bit, but IMA is
Right,
more or less remained the same. Yeah.
right, right. So no, that's fine. That's everyone has their individual choices, and since even various people, even I'm also, looking that in case I want to explore more, although I don't want to, but
Hmm.
I'll prefer a 1 year MBA in USA that gives
Right,
me a 3 year work experience over there.
right, right.
Right.
So
So
for me, I was not open to going abroad that much because I kind of wanted to stay in the country. So if you go to a foreign B school, then you will necessarily have to work there
now
to earn back the
from
money.
where that,
So
motivation comes in, like you just, want to stay in India only and don't want to explore the foreign places.
yeah, yeah,
Now, normally people don't want to stay in India. They want
things
to
like
move
that.
out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why so?
So you want to know why?
Reason,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah. So one thing is that I feel a lot of opportunities are coming up in India, actually much more, and you have a lot of opportunities to develop as well. See, it's one thing to go to a developed country and try to develop something that's already developed. But in India, I feel like you have a lot of opportunities. For example, I think just to give an example, our payment systems is one of the most advanced payment
Okay,
systems in the
right.
world, and this is something that you can explore in India, which I feel like, and I feel you have a lot more opportunities now, especially because India is growing, it's becoming a global economy. It's beating a lot of countries when it comes to GDP. The world looks up and say, okay, India is actually they're welcoming us in. And the other thing is, as an Indian, I feel I would be more respected here than,
Aha,
depending on visas and work permits and
right.
all of that abroad. I don't want to live on those kind of vagaries. I want to
Mhm.
live a life here because I know that I will be respected here and I will not be thrown out of the country for any
Mm.
reason. So that is also another important thing. And the other thing is, of course, staying away from your family and staying away from your friends, etc. That is also a small factor for me, but the main factor there, yeah, the first.
I think you have lived in cities rather than in villages. Is it true?
Yeah, generally, yeah, yeah.
Visit some, villages, tier 2, tier 3 city. I think your perspective
Mhm.
towards India will change a little bit. Although India is a
Right,
great
I
place,
agree.
but the privilege
I
you are
agree.
getting,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
I
definitely.
am sitting at the, national
100%.
national
Yeah,
capital region. I am sitting here. No, I am
correct.
talking in the
Yeah,
negative sense.
definitely.
I am talking in the negative
Yeah, I
sense.
agree. I agree. Yeah, yeah,
So
100%.
it is not developed at all. 90% people having 25,000
Yeah,
per month,
agree.
lesser salary. People are struggling a bit.
Agree.
I
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
realized until, I just explored other places and saw
Mm-hmm.
that how poor my country is, and it
Mm-hmm.
really feels you. It hurts you.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But that gives a lot of scope for development in our country as well. And if you want to actually take up, say, for example, a village and adopt it and make it
mm,
better, you have a better chance to serve your nation here than to serve some other
right,
country.
obviously
Anyway, this nation has fed me from the beginning. So, yeah,
that can always be done. And I'm also doing this. This is also kind of social work to,
yeah,
guide the youth. And thank you for your,
yeah, yeah.
contribution. I wish you do not have any issues if we publish it on our YouTube channel.
No, no, no problem.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I didn't want to say it. Yeah.
we'll definitely share a link with you as well for the documentation purpose.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Yeah.
much.
I hope it was an insightful interaction
Yeah,
for
it
you as
was
well.
indeed. It
And
was
I hope
indeed.
you got what you wanted. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be. And please do also share it on your LinkedIn profile as well, so
Sure,
that your
sure.
connection also
Yeah,
get
sure.
benefit from it. Yeah,
Yeah, sure,
thank you so
sure.
much.
Yeah.
you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.